I have failed on stage, I have failed in the studio. People told me I should better quit. So I used to believe that failing was something to avoid, something to be ashamed of. But looking back, every meaningful decision in my life came after a failure. Stick around, I'll show you why failing might actually be a good thing. Hey everyone, Mark here. Welcome back to Mindset of a Musician. If you are afraid of failing, this video is for you. It can be really hard these days to deal with failure, especially when we are constantly confronted with success stories, highlight reels, perfect lives, and only few people are honest about how they actually got there. And most of the time, the answer is simple: through failure. If you want to dive deeper into these topics, join me in my Mindset Monday newsletter. Link is in the description. So, first of all, we need to understand why we're so afraid of failing. Why are we so afraid of failing? To understand this, we need to go back to our childhood. In school, we are usually taught that making mistakes is a bad thing. I know this is slowly changing, but for most of us, mistakes was something to avoid at all costs. And after 10 to 13 years of that, this mindset gets wired into our brains. Second thing to consider is how we grew up at home. If you were constantly blamed or punished for making mistakes, chances are you become hesitant to take risks later in life. So all of that shapes how we step into adulthood. Maybe you're working at a job that doesn't fulfill you, but you don't quit because quitting would feel like failing. Or you've played your first show and you messed up the song, and now you decide to never step on stage again because you hate that feeling. But in reality, we're not afraid of failing. We are afraid of judgment. We are afraid of hurting our ego. And we are afraid of comparison, especially the kind that we consume every day on social media. So this leads us to the next part, which is why failure is part of growth. To rewire our brains, we need to reframe failure. We have to understand that we cannot grow or reach our goals without making mistakes and without failure. If you read the biographies of successful people, you will almost always find success built on failure after failure. So failures are experiences. They are things we can reflect on, things we can learn from, things we can grow from. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed, I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And that quote perfectly sums up how I see failure today. It is not the opposite of success, it is the path to it. And of course, if you give up after failing, there's no growth. It would be like saying you'd only play a game if you were guaranteed to win. You'd never play at all. So growth requires staying in the process. It requires falling in love with making mistakes and learning to embrace failure as part of the journey. Let me share a few personal examples. Learning to play guitar was a constant feedback loop of making mistakes and learning how to not do them again. Learning how to play chord changes faster, learning theory, etc. That's how progress happens. And singing was the same. I can't tell you how many people came up to me after shows when I was a teenager and told me I should stop singing. And they told me I should focus on guitar because I'm a bad singer. And I could have quit singing because of that. But I kept going because I believed in myself and I wanted to sing my own songs, and I knew it was a technique and not my voice. And sure enough, I know that the character of my voice will not be loved by anyone, but you get the point. Songwriting works the same way. The first songs I've ever written were honestly terrible, but I kept writing, I kept analyzing, I kept making mistakes, and I kept learning from them. And eventually the songwriting skills and my songs got better. Playing shows wasn't easy either. I still remember my first gigs. I was so nervous that my hands cramped up and I couldn't barely play. And I didn't know anything about breathing or controlling my nervous system to calm me down. So all I did was I played more shows, and eventually I became more comfortable in that situation. Being an artist today brings a new kind of failure through comparison on social media. If you post a reel and it does not perform well and doesn't get any reaction, it suddenly feels like you're failing. But the truth is, Everyone who's successful has been there. They've stuck to the process. And if you keep going, you stay in the process too. I've made a whole video about that. If you want to check that out, link is in the description. So you do the work, you make mistakes, and you learn from them. And then you repeat that cycle over and over again. The last thing I want to talk about is resilience. By making mistakes, we gather experience. And those experiences are neither good or bad. They're simply the result of trying something new. And if we don't let judgment, comparison, or ego blind us, we train ourselves to become more resilient. And resilience is essential if we want to keep going and eventually reach our goals. The word resilience comes from the Latin resilire, which means to jump back. It's the ability to bounce back from adversity. For me, that meant detaching my identity from the outcomes, letting go of perfection, accepting that repeating something over and over again will include mistakes, and that some might call that failure. But if I keep going and use systems instead of relying on motivation, I will feel fulfilled at the end of the day. And I will keep growing. I will be a completely different person with skills I would have never developed if I wouldn't have started, if I had given up. That's why I'm still making music, and that's why I'm sharing this on YouTube. So I hope this video gave you a different perspective on failure. Let me know in the comments what failure means to you, and feel free to share a story of your own. Leave a like if you got something out of this video, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next one.